Okay, so in this session, we're going to talk about parenting and protecting. And so first, we're going to go over some of the things that activists are doing and how they're indoctrinating children. And it's important to understand that there are individuals and organizations that are actively recruiting children to be trans. Dr. Erin Brewer, she's another woman who actually struggled with her gender, and she actually shared a lot of this information with us during our Back to School webinar part 2. That's on our website, so I do encourage you to watch that or to go look up her website and to watch her videos. She's very informative about this type of stuff. One of the things that she shared with us is this Twitter post from an activist that said, "It's time to go on the offensive. I won't rest until every American child has been transed." Now, I understand that not everyone thinks this way and is this extreme, but I do want you to be aware that this is some people's perspective and they are actively trying to trans children. So let's talk about this gender indoctrination process. The first thing is that activists usually target vulnerable children. So these are children who are either unpopular, maybe they have autism, maybe they've gone through some kind of trauma or depression. And studies have actually shown that children with ADHD are 7 times more likely to present with gender dysphoria, and children who are on the autism spectrum are 8 times more likely to present with gender dysphoria. So it's clear that children who struggle with their mental health are going to have multiple mental health issues, right? That's going to come out in many different ways. And then those are the kids that are often targeted by activists. They are not the only ones, but they certainly are easier targets, and so that is why they do that. The next thing is they do what they call love bombing, where they show those children affirmation and love. So what this does to the child is that they then suddenly are fitting in, and they have friends, and they have what feels like a family at that school or the after-school program or wherever it is that they're meeting these individuals. But soon after that then, activists will try to isolate the child. They will encourage the child to stay away from anybody who would not affirm them or accept their transgender identity. And then we see that they use manipulation on the children. They can manipulate their memories by telling the kids things like, well, you were always trans, you just repressed this because your parents didn't accept it. Or, you just felt this way as a boy or a girl because your parents really wanted you to be a male or a female, or you weren't really happy with your family. So they try to manipulate the child's memory. They also try to manipulate their identity by getting them to go full-on trans identity and going through that gender transition process that we talk about in our other presentations. They also can encourage the kids or manipulate the kids' reality. So they might say things to kids like, well, men can be women and women can be men and biology is meaningless and reality is what you think it is. So then they start teaching the kids these types of things, and that really starts to mess with their reality. And then they also manipulate their thoughts. So the way that they would do this is kind of an in-group, out-of-group perspective. So those of us in the group, this is how we think, and if you think otherwise, then you're a hater, you're not part of this community. They also will tell the kids that anybody who challenges their perspective, they're a hater or they're bigoted. And so then that forces kids to not want to question the things that they're hearing because they don't want to be outside the group. They want to be accepted. They want to be in the group. It's also important to understand that most of the children who come out as transgender are part of a peer group that tend to mock people who are not LGBT identified. So there's a lot of peer pressure in this too, which is why it is affecting young girls a lot. It is affecting a lot of kids, not just those who maybe are already struggling with their mental health. All right, so there are individuals and organizations that are actively sexualizing children and normalizing what we like to call anything goes sexuality. And we know that children are encouraged to access resources that are graphic in nature. They promote all forms of sexual activities, And in many cases, they train children how to actually engage in those sexual activities. And I know the screen's flashing behind me, but those are two examples of some resources that do this. So the first is a video from amaze.org, and it's called Am I Ready to Have Sex? And then the second is a very popular book in middle schools right now, which shows a lot of sexual images, including a little boy and little girl masturbating. And in that presentation that we give normally, we will go through and show you the pictures and images and read from these types of books and that type of thing. We give a lot more detail about that. But so let's talk about how these things are sexualizing our children. Well, first of all, there are a lot of books and curriculums that are teaching kids, well, it's your body, it's your choice, okay? Now, at a very young age, it's incredibly important to teach our children to protect their bodies from unwanted attention and unwanted touches. That's super important, okay? However, the books and the curriculums are confusing children by relating private parts to their belly button. And so what they're doing is they're calling this the middle section of your body, and they're basically saying it's your choice then who gets to see those middle parts. And so that's really confusing children about what it means to keep private parts private. Next, what we're seeing is the idea of communicating consent. Now, communicating consent is a good idea. The problem is that teaching children to say no to sexual advances or to delay their sexual initiation is very rare in sex education classes today. Instead, the lessons emphasize how to say yes, how to communicate their sexual desires, and then how to convince partners to use contraception. And there are curriculums now that actually have role-playing scenarios to have children learn to communicate their sexual desires with each other and to convince the partner to use contraception and things like this. In one of the curriculums that we know is currently being taught in New York through Reach CNY and Planned Parenthood, this is a curriculum that they use. It's called Be Proud, Be Responsible. And there is a note in this curriculum to teachers that says this: teachers are instructed to require all students to participate in role plays, even if they feel uncomfortable doing so. And that's on page 263 in that curriculum. So this woman, Monica Klein, she used to be a Planned Parenthood educator. However, she started to realize that the educational methods of Planned Parenthood were actually sexualizing kids. So on her website, It Takes a Family, Monica explains her findings, one of which she says, back up a second. One of which she says is that teens say that condom demonstrations make them feel that sex is expected of them. Something else that she also found was that the majority of sexually active teens say that they regret becoming sexually active and wish that they had waited. So the problem here is that not many curriculums are emphasizing to kids how to say no. They're just teaching them, if you're interested in that person, here's how to communicate consent and that type of thing with them, how to convince them to have protection if you're going to engage in sexual activities. Next, we see that a lot of books and curriculums are celebrating and normalizing diverse sexual behaviors. So all forms of sexual behaviors are being celebrated and normalized, and many of the books contain sexually explicit material that's made available to children, and this is happening under the guise of diversity. So the idea behind this is that not everybody's straight, so you can't have sex education just for straight people. You have to include it for everybody else and everybody else's taste of sexual behaviors and activities. So what this does, though, is, again, as I kind of mentioned in the beginning, this is shifting sex education from focusing on reproduction and biology to now a focus on sexual pleasure. And there are curriculums out there that talk about, people say having sex with a condom isn't pleasurable. Well, in class today, we're going to talk about ways to make it more pleasurable. There are curriculums that say that Be Proud, Be Responsible. It's one of their lessons that they have. So this is a focus then to shift this. Now, oftentimes, though, this is another problem with this. The books that depict homosexual or transgender forms of sexual behaviors usually include explicit descriptions of things like abuse and rape. And so this can be traumatizing for kids, that they are reading or seeing images from these books, and they're getting confused then because they're thinking, is this normal? Is this going to happen to me, right? These are things and concepts that are definitely not appropriate for children. The other problem with this too is that it's important to recognize that some of these behaviors, like oral sex or anal sex, these things actually have much more significant health risks than traditional vaginal sex. And yet, these other forms of sexual behaviors are being promoted to children as a safe way to have sexual pleasure without the risk of pregnancy. So they give kids just lists of all these different things that you can engage in that, don't worry, you won't get pregnant through it, okay? So celebrating and normalizing all forms of sexual acts end up confusing children about how to make healthy choices about their sexuality. And then the last thing here is just sexual risk reduction programs. So these are sex ed programs that actually assume that children are sexual from birth, which if they were, I'm not sure we would have needed sex education courses when they hit puberty, right? I mean, that's the whole point of those courses, is they're not sexual from birth. And then they also assume that kids are going to engage in these sexual activities. So what it does is these programs then say, well, we know you're going to engage, so we're just going to teach you how to reduce your risk of pregnancy or reduce your risk of HIV, okay? But again, Monica Klein, she actually found that teens say that these types of classes make them feel pressured to have sex. Because again, nobody's really telling them, you don't have to, okay? You can say no to these things, you can wait. Okay, so now we're gonna talk a little bit about how you can protect your children through these things. So the first way to do this is to help shape their individual identity. And remember, you gotta be involved, you gotta be present, you gotta be there to do this, okay? So one of the things that we recommend and that Aaron Brewer recommends is to affirm your child as male or female. So affirm them in their biological sex. Reinforce that their biology is an integral part of who they are, that God has a plan and a purpose for their life as a male or a female. Then teach them to respect and protect their bodies. From a young age, teach them to name their body. You talk to them about family structure and parents and the difference between male and female. Talk to them about those unwanted touches. Encourage them that they can say no. You need to give these types of instructions because nobody else is, okay? And then help them to identify as part of your family. Show them the progression of their own development as, from when they were little babies all the way till now, that they've always been a part of your family. Use family photos and albums, those height charts, that type of thing. And show them that you celebrate them at each of these stages in their life, that the family celebrates that growth and that development. Prepare them for puberty. Affirm them that those changes that are happening to their body are good, even though they may be uncomfortable. Prepare them for the fact that, yes, they are going to start to have sexual desires, and that is normal, and that you as their parent will be there to help them walk through everything and all those changes. You've been through those things. And then reminisce, or Dr. Aaron Brewer likes to say layering memories, okay? So if you tell them stories about when they were little, tell them stories about when you were little, tell them things about how, oh, you're a lot like daddy in that way, right? Help connect them and ground them to you and to the family. Also, try to do things like, if you went to a park a lot when they were a little kid, bring them back there for birthday parties, or bring them back there for, just a family game out, and remind them, we used to come here when you were a kid. This helps to ground the child in reality, and it combats all of those things that we saw that activists try to indoctrinate the kid. You weren't really happy with your family. Yes, I was. I can see it in all the pictures in my house. Mom and I, we sit and we talk about this, we reminisce. We loved going to that park. We do that regularly. These were things that will help ground your kids so that they're not influenced by what is being taught to them if they're hearing it elsewhere. And then make strong connections with your kids. Linda Seiler talks about how at the root of many of the sexual issues that we're seeing today, it's really a relational issue with a parent. So we see this in a lot of different ways. We might see a girl who doesn't connect with her father, and then what ends up happening is that she's always searching for affirmation from men, and she's, typically throwing herself at men then. We might see this with a girl that doesn't connect with her mom then, and then she's always searching for that affirmation, for that mother figure in her life. And a lot of these girls can end up having homosexual relationships because they want that love and that affirmation from that parent or that gender that they never got. And this can happen with boys too. I'm just giving you a couple of examples here. Now, you might struggle with connecting with your kid because maybe, I'm just giving you another example here, maybe you're a big manly man and you like to do things like wrestle or sports or do whatever, and maybe you've got a boy that's just really gentle and quiet and shy, and he's like not interested in that stuff. Well, part of this is learning how you can connect with your child. So that big burly dad, you know what? He can go hang out on the couch, okay, grab a drink and maybe listen to his son play the piano and encourage his son in that. Or maybe he can sit down next to the piano and say, I don't know how to play, son, but show me a song. Can I play with you, right? I mean, there are ways that as parents, we have to step out of our comfort zones and our interests and start enjoying the interests with our kids to encourage them, no matter who they are or if they're gentle or quiet or outgoing or whatever their personalities might be. This past Christmas, okay, we had my in-laws in town, and my mother-in-law loves to sew. And so we had our huge dining room table with like 4 sewing machines on it, okay? And she was at one with my son on her lap. He's 8 years old now, and he was sewing a pillow. And we had our cousin who is at RIT, he was over and he was making a pillow for his girlfriend. And then my daughter was sitting over there making a quilt, and I'm sitting here like, this is awesome. And my husband's like, clean up the table, we gotta eat, But the point is that you can enjoy these activities with boys and girls, and you can still affirm them in their gender, even doing these activities as well, okay? So if your children are getting love from all the right places, they're not going to be looking for it in all the wrong places. Okay, next, shape their family identity. And here are some ways that you guys can do this as your family identity, so not just their individual identity, but family traditions. Something that your kids are going to look forward to. Yes, we do this every May, or we do this every Christmas, or whatever it is, and it's something that you do as a family. Have a family holiday. My son actually did this the other day, and my son actually did this the other day. He came up to me one night. He's like, Mom, I think we need a family holiday. Mind you, he's 8. And I was like, okay, what do you think we should do? And he said, I want everybody to go pick a book. And then I want us to all sit on the couch. And I want each one of us to read our book while we snuggle. I said, hey, that's a great family holiday, okay? So just, you let your kids decide things like that. Choose things that they would like to do and make a family holiday out of it. Have family greetings, something that when your kids walk through the door and they come home from school, there's something that they know you're going to do. Or maybe if it's just when you guys get together, okay, you're going to go pick up your kids now. There's a family greeting or thing that you always do. This helps your kids to feel connected to something so that they're not feeling like they need that connection from other places. My husband and my son, they have a secret handshake between the two of them. My daughter and I have no clue what it is, but they've got that, and that's a cool daddy-son thing that they have. Daily rituals. So this is something that, again, your kids can look forward to. It helps ground them in their reality of, okay, this is life and it's good, and when things can't go the way that it's supposed to go, warn them. I always find that if we switch things on our kids, like, oh, we can't do this right now, we got to do this, they freak out, right? But if I can tell them ahead of time, hey, you know what, we're going to get home way too late, we're not going to be able to do regular bedtime, or I know I said we'd be able to do this today, something came up and we can't, and you prepare that for them, then they know they've got a regular schedule and routine, that's part of family, this is how we do things together, and then you warn them when that has to get messed up. And then celebrate each season of life. Make sure they are seeing you celebrate singleness and that you're celebrating marriage. That they can see these things within the context of the family, right? That even within the family, some people are single and some people are married, okay? Remind them that God has a plan for them during each of those seasons in life. So if we can teach our children that they don't need to be labeled to be part of something, right, to belong. They don't need to be labeled to belong, okay? They are already a part of their family, and they are already unconditionally loved. Now, part of this indoctrination is also towards parents. So just be careful, okay? You're going to hear from medical personnel and from activists that if you don't affirm a child that claims to be transgender, then they will commit suicide. This is not true, okay? 80 to 90% of the kids who struggle with their gender as a child will grow out of that and will feel comfortable as their biological sex as an adult if you affirm them in their biological sex. So that's what I'm saying. If we do these affirming things when they're younger, even if they struggle, they can grow out of that stuff. So just be careful that as a parent or as a grandparent or guardian, that you're watching too the stuff that you're buying into as well. All right, let's talk about a few safety measures that we can put up. So if any of you guys spend much time, inside the schools or universities and stuff, you might see signs like this on office doors or on libraries. And these are, safe spaces, safe zones that signify that these spaces are LGBTQ accepting. And to be honest, there is a lot of good associated with that, right? We want everyone to feel loved and to have a place that they're welcome. People deserve that, okay? Remember, we're created in the image of God, right? They deserve to be loved and to be welcomed. The problem, though, with this is that in these spaces, then, everybody's affirmed, and nobody's allowed to question perspectives. And so that's not good, because then we can't have a discussion of what is truth and what is harmful or not. So my question today then is to think about this. So what does it really mean to be a true safe space? So being a safe space does not mean a place where brokenness is accepted or celebrated, okay? Where it's not affirmed or celebrated. It means being a place where you can go and find people who love you, okay, and are helping you to discover truth and who are going to help you get the help that you need, all right? Now, the church, sadly, has fallen greatly short of being that safe place for people where they can go and be loved, all right? The purpose of church, if you think about it, is first of all to introduce people to Jesus. And how can you do that if you don't welcome those who don't know Jesus, right? You got to be willing to welcome them. Secondly, the second purpose of the church is to help people be more like Christ. So again, this is not a place that we are going to celebrate a person's brokenness, but we're not going to treat them any differently than we want to be treated because we're just as broken, right? Now, countless times I've actually heard testimonies from people like Linda Seiler and others who have said they struggled with their gender, they struggled with sexual brokenness. And it was actually when they finally went to a pastor or a friend and they admitted what was going on, that person's response made all the difference in their life. They didn't just accept it, they didn't just affirm them, they didn't just totally reject them. Instead, they said, "Thank you so much for coming and talking to me. I know that was difficult for you. I'll walk with you through this and help you get the help that you need." And that totally just changed their world. Okay, so I'm not just saying this to pastors, I'm saying this to the church at large, to people in general, that you could have just an amazing impact on somebody in the way that you respond, which is why we had that respond to your kids with compassion. We see that happening. So the question then is, the question then is your church really a safe place? The same thing for your family. Is your family a safe place? Do your kids feel this way? Do they know that they can come talk to you about those problems and the things that they struggle with and still be loved by you and you'll be there to help them through it? Do their friends know that? Do the friends like coming and talking to you because you're that type of person? Do they see that in your family as well? Now, this is very closely related. I bring this up because in a lot of curriculums, they are taught to encourage kids to have safe adults in their life, all right? And the reason why is because oftentimes it's actually the parents that are abusing the kids at home, okay? And so they are setting up other safety measures for the kids to think about who do they feel comfortable going to talk to, all right? However, though, what we are seeing now is that parents, not just for abusing their kids, but for not being willing to affirm them in their transgender identity, are now being labeled as unsafe adults for their kids. So we have to be very careful with how the school is projecting certain things to the kids and activists and that type of stuff as well. So again, the question is, what does it really mean to be a safe adult? Being a safe adult does not mean affirming or celebrating brokenness. It means showing compassion and love to everyone and helping them discover truth. Okay? Now, I want to just put a warning out there. Don't assume that all school personnel are safe. This came out recently that the Brighton High School teacher had possessed child pornography and secretly recorded female students. I say that because I went to Brighton High School. This happened after I was there, but so that's near and dear to my heart that's happening at the school where I grew up. Also, there was an analysis conducted by Fox News Digital where nearly 270 public educators were arrested on child sex-related crimes in the U.S. in the first 9 months of last year it was. This ranged from grooming to raping underage students. And those educators included principals, assistant principals, teachers' aides, and substitute teachers. So we are living in a very scary environment where kids are taught, don't trust your parents if they don't affirm you, come find safe adults at school, and talk to those adults about your sexual desires. That's what kids are being taught. So we're living in a very twisted and scary generation right now. But you can encourage true safe adults in your child's life. Encourage relationships with mentors that you know, that you trust, that share similar values with you. And then also make sure that you are checking out your healthcare providers and counselors who your kids might be seeing. Because it's the same thing. In New York, once your kids hit 12, you don't have to be in the doctor's office with them. The doctors can talk to your kids by themselves. You need to be able to prepare your kids for that if they are going to talk to a healthcare personnel alone. Do you trust that those doctors are not going to be pushing your kid into going through the gender transitioning process or giving your kids information on contraception and abortion? Do you know what your healthcare providers are going to tell to your kids and offer advice and even the questions that they're going to ask them? So make sure that you're doing that. Now, in some cases, your child's primary care might actually be through the school. Make sure that if that is the case, that you're building a good relationship with those school nurses and those doctors. Make sure that you make your beliefs clear and your desires clear for how they handle your child's health in that way. It's always a good idea to put your religious beliefs and what they mean to you as far as exempting your kids from certain things or your expectations for how they handle stuff. All right, so let's just summarize this session. So we talked about how individuals and organizations are actively recruiting children to be trans and actively sexualizing kids. And then we also talked about how you can help your kids to shape their personal identity as well as their identity as part of the family. Just a reminder to watch what type of information you're buying into as well. And then to make sure that you're actively creating true safe spaces for your kids and their friends, and then that you are actively making sure that you're encouraging relationships between true safe adults with your children and their friends. Okay, so any questions about this session? See, I promised you the first one was long, and the rest of them aren't that long. Yeah, go for it.
Who picks the curriculums for the schools?
We are going to get there. Those are the boards, the Board of Education. But yes, we'll get there in the school government and talk about that with the curriculums.
So this really hits home for me because I have a youth center, and this conversation's been coming up a lot. So in shaping the individuals, I as a mother and a grandmother, I can understand, and it's a great presentation, but do you have any advice for, a setting like mine? Because the children, I made a note that, the children that they go after are vulnerable children, and that's their target. And it's so true because, they do show them special, like love bomb them or whatever, and show them that they care. And so to counteract that, do you have any, because it's sort of different than your own kids or your grandkids.
Right, so you're saying at the youth center, how can you implement some of these things?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would definitely say, and I'm not sure, if the youth center is a Christian youth center or not, but I would say a lot of these things could still be applied. So the idea of helping those kids to understand they don't have to be labeled, that they're already a part of a group, that they're already loved there, they're already accepted. You can talk about things that are challenging to you. We're gonna love you and help you through even if you're struggling with stuff. Now, obviously, it's gonna look a little bit different because you don't have that informal time with your kids and that type of stuff. You might have to maybe make more opportunities there at the youth center. One of the things, I'm not sure, do you guys do lessons or like have curriculums on things like teaching classes and stuff, or is it? Okay.
It's kind of a community center, so it is faith-based, but it's not really, that's why I do it, but it's really for unchurched children in our community, and, they know that we have a talk time, and they know that we have prayer time, and some just tolerate it, so that they can hang out and play.
Right.
But we do have a talk time,
Okay.
and we did just have this like a couple weeks ago because in a Owego school there, they allow people to wear cattails, and so we were talking about confusion and if anyone was confused and stuff like that. So we do have some talk time, but you have to be
Yeah.
careful.
Yeah, so what I would say is you actually are in a great position that you can help kids to do that whole critical thinking thing. You could talk to the kids then about a topic about love and say to them, let's define this. What does love mean, right? And then kids can get into the conversation and share what they think, and then you can help them to start shaping then their perspective of these concepts that they're hearing out there in the world and the words that they're hearing out there. And what do those things really mean? It irritates me a lot when I watch football with my husband on the back of the helmets that say choose love. And I'm like, well, we all agree with that. But does that mean that we all agree with what the word love means in that definition, right? And so part of that then is, helping the kids to see, okay, what is it that you believe? Why do you believe these things? Is there evidence for it? And then while you're having those conversations, to make sure that you are loving them and helping them to realize that this is a safe place, that they can be vulnerable. And part of it is you have to start by being vulnerable. Oftentimes, if the adults there can share about something in their own life or something that they've struggled with or something that they've been confused about, vulnerability like that in a leader is an invitation for others then to be vulnerable, and that's when people can change. It's when we put all those walls up that we can't really change, but once we're vulnerable, then we can let that help in our lives and stuff. So I'm sorry I don't have anything specific, but my husband's going to answer in a second. But taking a lot of these things and trying to adopt it more for like a group setting, and maybe thinking a specific thing in your mind, like I want to help the kids to realize this about the way that they communicate, or I want to challenge the kids to think like this, or maybe even just bringing up a topic about what about when people disagree with your perspective? Do you feel like they're rejecting you? You can ask questions like that, and then leave it open for conversation, and then making sure that you're gearing it towards helping to remind them and build those truths in their life that, we can still love people even though we disagree. Okay.
I'm actually not going to answer. I'm going to ask a question.
Well, before you ask that
Yeah.
question, could I just share something real quick?
Yes.
So this question was asked, and Francis Chan recently, with a bunch of other church leaders, came out with a curriculum. And you can find this, anybody who's listening here, anybody who's watching online, you can purchase this for your churches, you can purchase this for your home. It's Christian-sexuality.com. And what it is discover the truth about Jesus, sex, and gender. And it's a curriculum that you're able to take your kids through, you're able to take your youth group through, because I'm going to say this as a pastor. The greatest failure in America and why we find ourselves where we are is the church. And it falls on pastors. And Eric Metaxas just came out with a book called Letter to the American Church. And one of the things he looks at is the failure of the German church during the rise of Nazi Germany. They were silent, they were scared, and because of that, it allowed wickedness, it allowed lies of the enemy to prevail. And so I just want to encourage every parent in there, there are resources out there. Everything she's going over today, your greatest resource for your child, the greatest defense for your child against the onslaught of nonsense in this culture is your relationship with them. What you talk to them about them every day. And Debbie, for you and your youth center, you are a missionary. Because if you have kids that are unchurched, if you have kids that are lost, every other influence in school and everybody else is telling them, you got to believe this, you got to believe this, you got to believe this. But the thing is Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And a lot of people in our culture will say today is that's closed-minded. No, it's not closed-minded, it's truth. So I want to encourage you, if you're looking for, I've seen previews of this, I'm going to purchase this for our church as well, but Christianity. I got to look it up again real quick. But it is Christian-sexuality.com. I would really encourage you to look it up, and it has a whole description of what that's all about.
Before my husband asks a question, I will mention this. I actually took it out of the first part just to make it a little shorter. But when I was raising my kids as little kids, I always remember feeling a little discouraged when I'd ask them, like, well, why do you believe this? And they say, well, you do. And I remember being like, no, I want you to have your own faith, right? Like, I don't want it to just be because mommy says it. But the more I actually thought about it, I realized that's a good thing. If my kids are saying that they're willing to believe and trust in something because mommy and daddy do, that means they trust mommy and daddy. So even in this situation with the youth center, building your relationship with those kids will help influence them, because if they can trust the adults that are there and that are talking to them, and you can build a real relationship with them, sometimes it might start off of like, you know what, I really respect and trust these adults and they're telling me this. Maybe I should consider it more. And so that relationship with our kids and with other kids is super important, because if we mess up, man, we got to really handle our mess ups the right way, right? That's just an encouragement for that too, to make sure that you're building those relationships. Okay.
So you're talking a lot about love and how you don't like how people don't define love, because a lot of what we're seeing in today's culture, and I see it in my job working on college campuses, love is affirmation, affirming. And part of what you're talking about is that's not what love really is. So the question is, how would you
that I should define love?
How would you define love? Yes.
So I would definitely send you guys right back to the Bible, because God defines love, that love is patient and love is kind. And part of love does not delight in evil. And so that is where our culture is missing out. They've got the whole kindness part together. They've got a lot of those things. But love does not delight in evil. And so that's the part, especially with our children, that we need to make sure we are willing to stand up and talk about the truth and communicate these things. So I would definitely point to that passage. But thanks for calling me out, honey. All right, does anybody have any more questions, or else we'll take a couple-minute break here? All right, sounds like break time. Thank you, guys.